Hello and welcome in. My name is Mark, aka the Markster. This is video number 72 in the FreeCAD series. Today we're going to be making this star. And the reason for this model, I want to show you a couple of different ways to make this. And we're going to make use of a few workbenches. I don't think I've covered the surface workbench yet. We're going to use that one. We're going to use the curves workbench, a couple of tools out of there. And let me go ahead and show you which version we're using today. This is 0.19, revision 21654. This is one of the pre-release versions. This is one of the Conda builds. Let me go ahead and close that and create a new document. We'll go to Part Workbench. I have this macro set up to add a new sketch. You can do the same thing just by switching to Sketcher Workbench and creating it. This is covered in an earlier video in the series. I'm going to put it on the XY plane and I'm going to sketch out the sketch. So the way I learned to draw a star as a youth was something like this. And they always came out about that bad too. So I'm going to use construction mode to get this set up and constrained, and then come back with regular mode and kind of use this as scaffolding. So let me add a circle constrained to the center, and then we'll constrain each of these external vertices here to be on that circle. And we'll use this fix a point onto an object constraint. And we'll also want to make all of these edges equal. So we have 2 degrees of freedom, and that's the orientation and the radius of the circle. So I'll set this one as horizontal. Now we've got 1 degree of freedom remaining. Now we can go to normal mode, choose the multi-line tool again, and this time I'm going to catch these points. I'm going to set this one on this point. I'm not trying to get it all the way in the middle of there. To this point. The reason not to try to get it all the way in the middle is I'm going to come back afterwards and constrain those points to that other edge. Alright, and we'll select this point and this edge, put it on that edge, this point and this edge. Hope I'm not going too fast for you here. Select the point and the edge and the point on object constraint. So we're back to 1 degree of freedom, which is our radius. I'm going to close that. I'm going to go to DynamicData workbench. We could also use a spreadsheet for this and create a new object. If you don't have DynamicData, you can install that in the add-on manager tools, add-on manager. DynamicData is one we're going to be using today. Also curves right here. You, you need to have both of those if you're going to play along at home. Alright, now we'll select the DD object and add some properties. The property type is going to be length, and the name is going to be circumradius. And I'm just going to choose 75. We'll leave it in default group. And the next one is also going to be a length type. And this is going to be called depth. And I'm going to set that at 15. And we'll see what that's going to be used for a little bit later in the video. I'll double click back on the sketch and choose the radius constraint. Press the equals key on the keyboard or press this FX icon, either way. Bring up the formula editor, and in here we'll enter dd.dd, choose circumradius, and now we can see that when we open the DD object, we can modify these properties and watch how the sketch reacts. So that's the advantage of using the DD dynamic data object rather than a sketch. Rather than a spreadsheet. You'd have to switch to the spreadsheet page, make your changes, wait for it to recompute, and then switch back to see what difference was. With here, you can a little more interactively change it and watch the results as it recomputes. Now let's go back to part workbench, and I'm going to add here with this creation of parametrized geometric primitives, and we're going to choose point object, and I'm going to make 2 of those. You can see them here highlighted in green. I'm going to select one and look down here to the base dimensions, base location there. I'm going to set this one to depth. So you see how now it's above that XZ plane, that XY plane, by depth millimeters. I'll do the same with this one, except this will be equals key here minus dd.dd depth. So now there's one above and one below. And the best way to make this object is to use the loft tool here. Click loft. Select the first sketch, then the sketch, then the first point, then the sketch, then the other point. Choose create a solid and say OK. And this did not come out the way you were probably expecting it to. Notice all the curves. I don't want the curves in this particular model. So the option I want here is ruled. Set ruled to true. I could have also selected ruled in the dialog. Let me delete it and do it again to show you. Vertex sketch, vertex 1, create solid ruled surface. It's nice sharp points, and it's still fully parametric. Let's set that to 25, watch the difference. So this is the best way to make this particular model. It's simple because you don't have many objects. You only have the 2 vertex objects in the sketch and the loft and the DD object. But there's another way to do this, and I want to show you. I'm going to hide the loft, we'll reuse that sketch and vertex objects. And we'll go to Curves workbench. The reason to go to Curves, this tool here, create a line between two vertexes. Right here, the line tool. It's very handy, and I want to show you that tool in this video. Now, we're only going to make one of these arms, and then we'll use the draft workbench polar array to make the rest. But we could do them all individually too. So I select this point and then this one, and that enables the line tool. Then I'll select this point, if I can get it to select here, and that one, and make another line, and this one, and that one, and make another line. And I'm going to do the same on the bottom. Now if you have trouble selecting these points, you can switch over here to points mode and select the point. The shortcut for that is the V key and 1, the number 1. So V1 gets you in the normal mode, V2 gets you into the points mode. Just the letter V on the keyboard plus the number 1, or V and 2. You can see here it lists the shortcuts. So these two. V2 selected, V1, Alright, that ought to do it. Now we're going to go to the surface workbench. And there are two tools here to create a surface from 2, 3, or 4 boundary edges. This is similar to the ruled surface in part workbench, except it's you can use 2, 3, or 4 edges with this. The ruled surface, I think it's limited to 2 edges. There's also a tool in part workbench to create edges to create faces from edges, but they're not parametric. That's in the shape builder tool. These are going to be parametric. So let's choose add edge, and another edge, and another edge. And that created a face. And then we'll do it again. Add the edge. Two edges are probably enough, but I'll add 3. Let's see. Add the edge first. It turns purple to indicate that it's selected. Notice some are black, some are gray. It depends on the orientation of how whether it's facing inside or outside. I don't think it matters for the tool that we'll be using. I think I'm going to need to add one more line. Let's go back to curves and add one between these two points here. And then back to surface again. Uh-oh, wrong one. I don't want to use that one. So add an edge. Might not have needed that extra line. Let's see. Yeah, that would have worked. I'll go ahead and add it anyway. Alright. Now we'll go back to curves again for the next tool, which is this green icon. Make a parametric solid from selected faces. So we need to select these faces. And make the parametric solid. And then we can hide these surfaces and these lines. I wish it captured these and put them inside the hierarchy in a tree like Loft does, but it doesn't. Alright, so now we can go over to draft and make copies of this using the polar pattern. So we select our base object, choose the polar array. It's already conveniently at 5 elements. And there's our star. Now if we go to part and check the geometry on this, it's going to probably give us some errors, self-intersections. Yeah, the reason for that is we need to enable the fuse option in here to true. So we set that to true and it would fuse these objects together. So that corrects self-intersection problems. Another option is to fuse from part workbench. Just select the array and click the fuse tool. Does the same thing basically. So let's see if this is still going to be parametric. And set it down to 60. And it's got to do all those operations. Notice when I make the loft visible, it's got this, there's a word they call that. Can't think of it at the moment, but both faces occupy the exact same spot, so you get this sort of camouflage look. But it's a good way to check that they're both the same size. I'm always learning new things about FreeCAD. Let's check this geometry and make sure it's good now. And one of the things that I've learned recently is we can change the colors of individual faces pretty easily. I'm going to show you how to do that. This is taking a while, so I'm going to pause the video while it completes this check. And we're finished now. It took a while. It took a long time. I'm not sure why exactly. Let's see. It's not that big of an object. I'm going to delete that fuse. Go into the array itself and set fuse to true. This is going to take a while to recompute too. I did this earlier. That wasn't too bad. Now let's check the geometry. Just to see if it's a little faster like this or not. I think probably the internal representation of the object is the same either way you do it. We'll go ahead and pause this, then I'll be back when it finishes. And we'll look at adding colors to individual faces. And we're finished finally. It took a long time too. So why does it take so long to do some of these check geometries? Well, if we look at settings here, we want to make sure we're not running single threaded for one thing. Now if you run Bob check, it's a more intense check. It can find issues that the other check, the BREP check, does not find. So you really want to run the Bob check. It stands for Boolean operations. Now we can check off the individual checks. The one that really takes a long time is the self-intersect. But we don't want to disable that because it's the most important of all these checks is the self-intersection check. But I'm going to disable it and then run the check again. And you see how fast it went that time? So that's the check that takes so long to do. So if you have an object and you know that the changes you made did not lead to self-intersections, but you want to check all these other things more quickly, you could disable that temporarily, and then when you're ready to move to the next step, maybe check the self-intersections again. I don't think any of these other ones really take that long to check. It's mostly the self-intersection. Evidently, checking for self-intersections is a pretty intense process. Alright. Oh, I also remembered it's called Z-fighting. When you have two objects the same size or two faces that are at the same location. It's Z-fighting. Which one gets shown? And that's where you get this. So if you see that, often there's an object that you can hide, like these surfaces. See that one? It was not hid automatically with the solid tool. I built a solid. That's why I hit it afterwards. So if you see that kind of weird looking effect, that's what's going on. Alright, so now if you right click on the object and choose set colors, I don't know why it's not bringing up the dialogue. That one's working. And it's not being called down here in Python console either. Must be a bug in the latest build. Let's try this loft. And that's working there. But not with the array. Let me create a clone. Hide the original. For some reason it's not working on the array objects. Getting sidetracked here. Let's just use it on the loft. Alright. So we right click and choose set colors. And then select a face. Let's select these four here. We'll make these maybe red. Maybe yellow for that one. And violet. So you get the idea. This is something I just learned. I'm always learning new stuff. So no matter how long you've been using the software, you can always learn new stuff about it. Well, that's going to be it for today. We covered two different ways to make the star object. We looked at some of the really neat tools in the curves workbench, at least a couple of them. This make a solid and this create a line between two vertices. There are lots of other really nice tools in this. A nice workbench. We've looked at some other things in some earlier videos. This map a sketch on a surface is one. Honestly, I don't know enough about this workbench to really cover all this stuff. I've used this one. It joins edges to a single edge. I've used the discretize, and maybe we'll cover these in a later video. It's really neat workbench. So you could make this star in part using the shape builder, and from here you can make the edge from vertices like I did with the line tool and curves, and face from edges right here. Then create a shell from the faces, and finally a solid from the shell. And all that works great, but the only problem is it's not parametric. So in other words, if we change the DD properties here, our object will not automatically resize itself. It's going to take it a while to do it. Here it is. We would have to go back in and redo all this stuff, all the lines and all the edges and the surface faces. So that's the drawback to this shape builder right here. But the tool in curves to make the line, and the surface and the solid, this object here, and the surface workbench tools are all parametric. So that's the advantage of using them. So again, thank you for watching, and as always, have a great day.